it away.
Thank you, Vanya. You are so sweet. I'm just going to pull up my chair and chat with you for a little bit. As a couple of you mentioned, this is so funny for me to be in front of the camera again after having been the camera person behind the scenes for a number of people's food demos recently. So I've had the pleasure of, when I was the camera person, of going to that person's house and helping them with the camera work. And then, oh darn, they twisted my arm and made me eat what wonderful things that they had prepared. So that is something that we can really look forward to when we do in-person food demos again, because that is just one of the very best parts, to taste those things. As we all know, all those of us who love to cook know that it's all about the eating part, of course. So today I am going to talk about picnics and potlucks a little bit, and I'm going to talk about two recipes. And the reason I chose these recipes is because every time that I make them for a potluck, typically, they're gone. I hardly ever bring home any leftovers. They're very popular, and both of them are very easy, very incredibly easy to make. They seem like they would be hard, but all of them have very few ingredients and they're not hard at all. And that's one of the key elements of especially a last minute thing, like, oh, can you bring such and such, or can you bring something to the potluck? What could you bring? So the things that I'm going to talk about today are German potato salad and Boston baked beans. Now I'm going to talk about the potato salad first. The potato salad is something that I grew up with because my mother is German and Polish, and potatoes were a big part of our diet. And I just loved my mother's German potato salad to the point where it was one of the first things that I learned to make, so that I could make it for those picnics and potlucks that we had to go to. And the recipes that I have provided you with, both of the recipes are directly off the internet, and both of them are really exactly what I remember and really authentic. But I did put the links to them on your on the recipe, because I don't want to claim that I invented these recipes. Both of these are long time recipes and been around a long, long time. A couple of things you want to know about both of these recipes is that they are both gluten-free, and but they are not vegetarian, because as you can imagine, there is a little delicious ingredient in both of them, and that ingredient is bacon. So bacon is always something that spices up the flavor. I even know a few vegetarians who sometimes eat a little bacon, well, in something like this. So just kind of an aside, in case you are a vegetarian, these recipes both really depend on the bacon for the flavor. So if you are really strictly vegetarian, this is probably not something for you, because you really do need to have that bacon flavor in it, that kind of salty and meaty and kind of flavor. A couple of things about the potato salad recipe. You have the version that is for 8 people. And the reason that is because when I was a kid, my mom taught me that when you take dishes to a potluck, you make enough servings for 8. And the reason for that number was, obviously, it seems like kind of a lot, but what it allows for is that not everyone will be able to bring something. And some people will bring the drinks, for example, or the ice, or the paper goods, or that kind of thing. So if you have a large potluck and people are bringing all different kinds of things, if you bring enough for 8, you will always have enough to go around. Everyone will get something at the potluck. So that was just a kind of a little bit of an aside. And another thing about the potato salad recipe that I've given you is that if you go to that website, you can actually adjust it down or up, should you so desire. I've given you the recipe for 8. I'm actually going to make the recipe half the size, which is the default. When you go onto the website, it shows it for 4. And the reason for that is, like I said, I always, if I'm making something for a potluck that I don't really know how many people are going to be there, I'll make it to serve 8. So So with that in mind, you can go to the website. There's a little thing at the top of the page, and you can just type in the number that you want, and it will adjust all the quantities so that you know how many potatoes you'll need, and you know, how much vinegar and all that kind of stuff. So it's a really nice thing. The beans recipe, on the other hand, is a little bit different. You could try to, I've never tried, but you could try to make the beans at a smaller quantity. You just want to be really careful about the moisture levels, because the beans is something that you cook for a long time. You assemble it and you first thing in the morning, and then you just let it cook. And it's no trouble at all, but you do want to pay attention to the moisture level while it's cooking. So if you're making a smaller quantity, you just want to be a little bit more careful about the moisture level. You don't want that to burn. You don't want it to stick to the bottom of your pan. Okay, potlucks today. Most of the potlucks I go to are by email, so people know what everybody else is bringing, and so you get in there right away if you know you want to make German potato salad today, or if you want to make beans, so you make sure that they know. So what I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to show you the entire potato salad recipe. It's that easy. I only did a little bit of prep in advance. I chopped up the potatoes, and I chopped up the onion, and I chopped up the bacon. And that is all I did in advance. Everything else is sitting on the counter, ready and waiting for you. And so this is what we're going to do. We'll get started. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to boil the potatoes, because they take the longest. They're going to take about 10 minutes to boil. And so I've got the water on. And where are my hot pads? Here we go. And I'm going to bring the water up to a boil. I've got it sitting here. It's pretty hot. And just put those potatoes in. And get myself another spoon. And I'm going to cover them back up just so they come back to a boil. And then they'll be just cooking away. The recipe says it takes about 10 minutes for the potatoes to cook, and it really depends on the potatoes. And this recipe called for red potatoes, but when I was a kid, we didn't have red potatoes. We had russets. Idaho potatoes were all we ever knew about, and they're fine too. The only thing, any kind of potato is fine. If you want to use more expensive potatoes and make it fancier, that's fine too. But all potatoes are really good. The only thing that you want to make sure if you use something like a russet potato is they have a higher moisture content, and they're going to get mushy faster. So you want them to not cook as long. You want to pay attention to the cooking process. And as soon as you can get a fork through one of the pieces of potato, you want to get those out and drain them, because you don't want them to turn to mush. Otherwise, it doesn't really feel like potato salad. You want big, nice chunks of potatoes. Actually, not big chunks, bite-sized chunks, but that's, okay. So the potatoes are on and ready to go. And the next thing that I have done a little bit in advance is I put the bacon in the pan, and I'm just going to turn it up and get it going. It's just in the pan, and I'm going to fry it up until it's a little bit brown, not burnt, of course. And the bacon's going to cook until it's brown, and then I'm going to take it out so it stays nice and crispy. And then I'm going to put the onion in the bacon grease. And this is a really neat recipe because everything goes back in that same pan. And then when you're done, you turn it all out of the pan and right into a bowl, and you cover the bowl and you bring it to your potluck. So it's a great recipe for that. So let's get this cooking up. Now, for those of you who know me, this would be the part where I would sit here and I would do my knitting, but that would be pretty boring for you. So what I'm going to do is see if anybody has any questions. Speak up. No questions so far? Okay, good. Oh, there go our potatoes. And our bacon's starting to cook up too. So I just turn the potatoes down just so the pan doesn't boil over. I like to cook with a lid on it because it keeps the boiling consistently. So that's just my preference. Probably uses a little bit less gas that way, or electricity if you've got an electric range. You can cook the bacon in the strips if you want to. It calls for to serve 8, it calls for 12 strips. So this called for 6 strips of bacon. But I like to chop it up in advance because then I don't have to deal with it later, and it crisps up and browns pretty much exactly the same. It seems fine to me. Ooh. Okay. I'm sorry, we don't have that smell-o-vision yet. Working on that one of these days. But boy, that bacon smells good. And our potatoes are boiling away. Let me just point out the things that I've got here on the counter. I've got everything ready to go so that when I just like with almost any time I cook, if I've got a lot of ingredients, I like to pull all the ingredients out and put them on the counter. Of course, the French have a name for it. It's called mise en place, and that means everything in its place. They always have fancy cooking terms for just ordinary things. But anyway, what we've got here is I have a bowl to put the bacon in when it comes out of the can. And then I'm going to pour the onions right into the bacon grease. When the onions have softened up, and I'm not going to brown them, I'm just going to get them good and soft and just starting to turn brown. Then I'm going to pour all the other ingredients in and bring that to a boil. And when the potatoes are ready, dump the potatoes in, stir it all up, and that's the entire recipe. So it's a really, as you can see, it's a pretty simple recipe. So I've got the onions that are ready to go. And then the ingredients that are going to go into the sauce are, this is a typical German potato salad. It's a sweet and sour. And what we're going to do is we're going to have this bacon. That's cooking really fast now. Keep an eye on that. It's getting kind of smoky. Don't want to burn the bacon. Okay, so we have a little sugar for the sweet. We have vinegar for the sour. We're going to add a little water just to make sure that it spreads all out. We're going to have some salt and pepper in there. And the salt is not necessary. I typically don't cook with salt, although if you're bringing something to a potluck and you want it to have a little more flavor, you're probably going to put the salt on in advance. And then the last but not least ingredient is a little bit of parsley just to green it up a little bit. So it looks like we have nice crispy bacon here. Our potatoes look like they are getting ready. So I'm just going to try and get as much of this bacon out of here as I can. And the nice thing about the grease being a little bit too hot right now is that as soon as the onions go in, it's going to cool the grease right off. So you don't have to be worrying about your smoke alarms going off. And not get too carried away. I have this up high just to get the pan heated up, but then I turned it down to medium. That was a little too high, so I've turned it down a little bit lower now. So it depends on the size of your burner and how hot your burner gets. But you don't want these to burn. Like I said, you just want them to soften up so they're completely translucent. You don't want people to bite into them and then taste raw onion. So you want that cooked onion to go into all the flavor with the bacon and the vinegar and everything else. So these are looking great. Let me show you how this looks. There's our, okay, there's our onions cooking up. So we have potatoes, onions, bacon, sugar, vinegar, parsley, water, salt and pepper. It couldn't be much smaller recipe. It's less than 10 items. So you won't have a lot of things that you have, and it's nothing fancy. These are not fancy foods, but if you have the chance to have German potato salad, if you have the chance to try it, I just think it's delicious. I love German potato salad. Okay. Okay, I'm going to now test my potatoes because I don't want them to turn to mush. So I'm going to take that off, stir them up, see how they're doing. That pierced really nice and easily. So I want you to see that. The fork went right through it. In fact, it went all over the floor. That was very exciting. I'm surprised the dog's not in here. There we go. Get rid of that. So I'm going to get those drained right away. Let the strainer out. I'm just going to drain them right into the sink. So as you can see, I don't think that took 10 minutes. So you want to just be aware of how your potatoes are cooking. And again, because you don't want them to cook to mush, because you're going to stir them up a bit and they will tend to want to mush down. So the recipe also calls for rinsing them off in some cold water. All that does is stop the cooking process. So that's a good thing. And now I'm going to check those onions. I think they look fine. Because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put everything back in, except for the bacon. I'm going to put that in a minute. And so now we're just going to follow the recipe. And like I said, I'm using the smaller recipe as opposed to the larger, so that Joe and I don't end up with potato salad for the next month. And not that I would mind, but might not be what everyone wants. So the first thing is 2 tablespoons of water. And that's easy. I always measure very carefully. Not. Okay, so now that's that water with that oil. Oh boy, that makes it look good. And then a 1/4 cup of white vinegar. I've already measured that out. So that's ready to go. Get those out of the way. And then we are going to have 3 tablespoons of sugar. And I'm going to wipe the tablespoon off so the sugar doesn't stick to it. Again, I measure so carefully. This is not like baking a cake or a bread where it's a chemical process. It's not going to matter. If you like it a little more sweet or a little more vinegar, that's okay too. Then I'm going to toss what I'm going to do with the parsley is, this is the recipe called for parsley to be put into it. But I thought it would look pretty if there was some parsley on the top as well, because you're bringing it to an event and you want, people to be impressed with your dish, of course. So I'm going to put about half the parsley in the pan and the bacon. Woo-hoo. Okay, here is our Ooh, does that smell good? Okay, it's the vinegar, very strong all of a sudden. I'm gonna go get the potatoes out of the sink. Toss them in. I'm just going to stir them up a little bit. You can see it's just about the right amount for all of this gooey goodness. And because they're hot, when you put them in the bowl, they are going to continue to cook just a little bit. So just kind of be aware of that. It might look at first like there's a little bit too much liquid, but potatoes are, that's what potatoes are really good at, is soaking up liquid. So you don't really need to worry about that at all. Right. There we go. And dish number 1 is finished. What do you think?
That looks delicious, Donna. I'm so jealous of what you might be smelling right now.
So, if you're in the neighborhood, just stop on by.
So it says on the recipe that this can be served cold or reheated. Is there a preference that you've seen when you've taken it to potlucks?
The preferred way of cooking of bringing German potato salad is to serve it warm. It doesn't have to be hot, but typically it's served warm because you have all that bacon flavor and vinegar and all that kind of stuff and the sweet and everything. The only thing with serving it warm is at potlucks, food tends to sit out for hours. And I personally have a problem with that because there is meat in it. If it's something without meat, then I don't usually worry about it, but it's bacon. Bacon has a lot of preservatives. It's probably fine, but if you're thinking that it might be sitting out for hours, you might want to bring it and serve it cold. That's just it's equally delicious. I will eat this out of the refrigerator cold. There's no problem with it at all. But just that's why I put the health warning at the bottom of the recipe, just because I'm just really conscientious about meat-borne illnesses. I don't want people to get sick from eating meat that starts to go bad. And meat's your worst offender at a potluck. So those are the things you got to be careful about. Is there other questions?
Are there other spices that you could put in? I know you said pepper, salt, parsley, or is this basically the standard for German potato salad?
It's really standard for German, but it's basically a sweet and sour potato salad. So if you like sweet and sour, and that's a very kind of Northern European thing. I think Norway with the fish and that kind of thing. But you could certainly add peppers and spice it up. You could add, I've seen it with caraway seed, and I've also seen it with hard-boiled egg, really thinly sliced and layered over the top. So you get a little extra protein. And Debbie had a comment, but I didn't get a chance to see it. Did you see that, Rania?
Yes, it says that her mother-in-law regularly put green pepper in.
Okay. Well, that would make it pretty too. So that would be very nice. So it's a very traditional recipe. So the tradition is different in every part of pretty much Northern Europe. I'm sure there's lots of variations, but when I found this recipe, to me, it tasted the most like what I remember from my childhood, which is why I really liked it. So that's why I recommended it to everyone. And besides which, it's so easy. It's just so quick. I mean, it's completely done and all my chatting in less than half an hour. So that's
Donna,
But
I've
do
never
you-
had it. So
you need to get in your car.
well, and I'm
Come on
vegetarian.
over.
I'm a vegetarian. So I'm thinking of all the veggie variations I could do. So the green pepper, Vanya said, maybe that will be a version that sort of fills in for the bacon.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I said, it's a tradition. Because it's traditional, it just means that you can do anything you want with it. And it's kind of funny because I typically don't cook specifically to a recipe because I don't always have all those things in the house. So I try to cook with what I've got left in the kitchen and use everything up. But for this recipe, just like I said, it just tasted like what I remember from when I was a kid. And it's just German potato salad was one of my favorites. So, but yeah, it can be made all kinds of different ways. All right, shall I move on?
Have
Go
you tried vegan bacon, Shirley? Or is that not as good?
I just got some. So that's another possibility for this recipe with Donna. Yeah.
I'd be really curious. I suppose you would want to add something that gave it not just the bacon itself, but the biggest thing about the recipe is there's no other oil in it. So for a potato salad, you want the oil and the vinegar, basically.
Yeah.
And so the oil in it is the bacon grease. So
Okay.
you would have to probably add some good quality olive oil or something like that to the vegan bacon. But
Yeah,
I think that'd be worth a try.
that sounds good. I'm gonna try it. I'll let you know.
Yeah, definitely. I think that would be worth a try. Okay, the next thing, any other questions, comments?
From who is this? Jean Linder. I've used soy bacon bits for some dishes for vegan friends, and it stays crunchy when she adds it at the end.
That's not a bad idea either. That's actually a really good idea because I've had soy bacon bits and they definitely taste like bacon. So that would be, and if you add it in with the vinegar and everything, it is going to soften up a little bit. And I think it's definitely going to give it a little bit of that bacon flavor. So that would be good. And then, you know, because they're crunchy, you have that on the top. And yum. Anyone else? Okay, moving right along. The next thing that I am going to talk about is the beans recipe. And I am not going to demo the whole beans recipe because you probably noticed on the recipe that it says cook for 6 hours. And I didn't figure you wanted to sit here and, you know, watch me, you know, just blather on for 6 hours. So I made the whole thing last night and I took pictures of the process and I'm going to show them to you so that I can just pretend like I'm cooking it for you. But then the beans are in the oven and we're going to get to see when we're all done. They should be just about finished and we'll get to see what they look like. A couple of things about this recipe. In case you're not from Boston or familiar with Boston, the recipe comes from a restaurant called Durgan Park. And Durgan Park was a really, really famous restaurant. And in fact, you can look it up on Wikipedia. It's got a great story. I recommend it. The original owners of Durgan Park restaurant were two guys named Durgan and Park. And they bought a warehouse to have a restaurant, and they opened the restaurant in, are you ready? 1827, almost 200 years ago. In that time, they became really famous for the way that they ran the restaurant, it was picnic tables and very informal. And the waitresses were known for being, well, two things. They were known for, if you even came in 2 or 3 times, they remembered everything that you had. And you have to be quick or you would get it again. And the second thing is, if you asked for something special or unusual, they were surly. That was just their shtick, their comedy. And so everyone would see, how surly can we get the waitress to be? And so it was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, they have not survived, but and it was only very recent. They closed the restaurant itself in 2019, only months before the pandemic. And then they did have an adjunct of it that was at the Boston airport. And I understand that closed last year. So that's so sad. It's just, you know, to have something almost 200 years, it's just amazing. And so the one recipe that I always loved, because my mother made baked beans, but not this particular recipe. But the Durgan Park baked beans were just known all over New England. And my husband's nodding his head because he grew up in New England. And so I just went looking for, you know, one of those copycat recipes that you can find on the internet. And I found this recipe, and it actually came from one of the last chefs that actually worked at Durgan Park. And the person who posted it on food.com is not that chef, but if you go to the recipe, it's very funny. It says, don't make any changes to this recipe. This is the recipe from Durgan Park. So if you make changes, don't criticize this recipe because that's not the Durgan Park recipe. So just so that you kind of get the idea how the traditions of the restaurant were, and it was just a very fun thing. So I'm gonna share my screen now. So hold on just a minute while I get my pictures up, and I'm gonna talk to you about a few things that I would like you to know about this recipe. Okay. Oh, this is a cup full of beans. It's actually a 2-cup measure full of beans. 2 cups, the recipe calls for a pound of beans, and a pound of beans is approximately 2 cups. It's pretty close. And in fact, I measured last night and it held out again. I actually took this picture quite a few months ago, the last time that I made the recipe for a potluck. And the reason that I took the picture is, you'll see in just a minute, but I wanted to point out that you can use any kind of small bean. So the recipe typically calls for red beans or small navy beans. Today I used black beans, and I just happen to like black beans, and I happen to have some. And so that was what I used. So, but the most important thing I want to point out is that you do need to start this the night before. It's a piece of cake. You've got to soak the beans. So you take your 2 cups of beans, you pour them in a big bowl full of water, and you let them soak overnight. And let me show you what happens. There's that same cup on the upper left-hand side. That's that same 2-cup measure. And you can see that it is now almost 6 cups of beans. So it's almost triple. So you really want to soak those beans overnight so that you get, they're plumped up, and then they're ready to absorb the flavors of all those other good things that go into it. All right, getting started. So as you can see, like I said, I did black beans this time. And at this point, I have soaked my beans, and I have drained them, and I've rinsed them off. And they're in a strainer in that bowl on top of the stove. And the next thing that you do is you boil them for 10 minutes. And you boil them with baking soda. And what that does is it actually plumps the beans up a little bit more. And the baking soda takes out a little bit of that gaseousness from our beans. So the boiling of the beans is actually a really good thing. So you can see I did that at 7 o'clock last night. Not too bad. All right. Now the beans are in the pan and you can't really see it, unfortunately. But what you can see is a little bit of foam, and the foam gets thicker and thicker. And you are very welcome to skim that foam off or not, because what you're going to do is you're going to pour them back into the colander and you're going to rinse them off once they've been boiling for the 10 minutes. All right, next is my little bean pot. I did not inherit this bean pot, unfortunately, but my mother had one just like it. And my husband's mother had one just like it. Isn't that amazing? And we were at a garage sale one day and I said, oh my gosh, a bean pot, just like my mom's. And so of course I had to buy it because, you know, beans in a bean pot are just the best. In fact, Durgan Park used to sell bean pots that said Durgan Park on the front of the bean pots. They looked exactly like that. They just said Durgan Park at the front. So this is how easy this recipe is. The original recipe calls for salt pork. Not all of us can find salt pork all the time. We don't typically have butchers in our neighborhood very much anymore, unfortunately. And so sometimes what you can find at some stores, and I think you found this at Sprouts, right, is bacon ends and bits. And that's what this is. It's little bits of the fatty ends of the bacon. There's quite a bit of meat in there as well. And that's fine too. I just cut them up and measured it into half-pound containers and stuck one in the freezer for today. And so that is what that is. And so that's really real easier to find than salt pork. If you find salt pork, typically it comes in a pound, and you'll just want to cut it in half and put half of it away. It freezes well, it keeps fine. It's, you know, it is bacon essentially. It's been cured and it's gonna last a long time. The other thing that's really nice about this recipe, and if you can imagine, Durgan Park was a big restaurant. They had lots of people come in every day and everybody wanted the beans. So of course they had to make them in huge quantities, not just a little bean pot, of course. And so they didn't do a lot of fancy chopping and that kind of thing. This is half an onion, and they put the onion in the bottom of the bean pot and put the bacon over the top. That's all there is to it. And then you pour the beans in. So as if you look closely, you can see some of the bacon, and the onion is in the very bottom of the bean pot. And there I am just pouring those beans right into the bean pot. So those are your prep steps. It's pretty tough, right? The next thing you do is you make up the liquids that go into your beans. And so these are the ingredients that go into the beans. And this is all there is. The first thing is some hot water, and then some dried mustard, molasses, and a little bit of, the sugar is not in this recipe. That was a mistake in the picture. And a little bit of salt and pepper if you want. Again, I typically don't cook with salt, but in something like this, I would put salt and pepper in if I was taken to a potluck and I wanted it to be exactly how I wanted it. So just so that you know. All right. So I just stirred everything up in this pot. I had the water nice and hot, and then I measured out the molasses, and I poured it in. I poured the molasses into the hot water, and then I just took the little cup with the molasses on it and stirred it around in the hot water. And so that got all the molasses off of it, so that all the molasses goes into the bean pot. Okay, so there you are. I poured everything over the top, and that's all there is to it. All those nice ingredients are in there, a little bit of mustard. Some of the recipes call for studding the onion with garlic cloves. I only learned about that last night. I've never done it, but the times that I've brought this to events, people have raved over it and said, yep, boy, it tastes like beans that they remember. So You can see the onion there, and then the rest of the salt pork pieces, the bacon pieces, you put right on the top. And really, that's it. You don't even have to stir it. It's really simple. So one of the things in the recipe that it tells you to do is to keep an eye on the moisture level. So I pulled it out of the oven after it had been cooking for 2 hours last night. You can see it's very liquid still. Just before I opened the oven, or as I opened the oven, it was still bubbling, and you could see that it was boiling, and it really didn't need any liquid. Later on, it might need some liquid. You don't want it to dry out. And spam, Mr. Risk is calling us again. And so you don't want it to dry out. So what you do is you just take about a half, thank you. You just take about a half a cup of water and pour it over the top. Again, you don't have to stir it in. You just want, thank you. You don't even have to stir it in. You just pour it over the top so that it bubbles and comes to a boil. Okay. I put the recipes up here for those people who are going to watch it on Zoom and didn't get the email. So if you are referring a friend, you can tell them go to the end and they can screen capture the recipe. There's the recipe for the German potato salad. And there's the recipe for the Durgan Park baked beans. And the links are on there as well. The whole link is there for those of you who have it in your email, but you can find it easily on Google. Just like, for example, with the baked beans, just go Boston Beans, Durgan Park. And food.com is where I found both of these recipes. They used to be called Genius Kitchen if you've been using their recipes for a while. I particularly like them. The recipes seem to be pretty dependable. What I'm going to do now is the beans are in the oven, and we're going to check them and see how they're doing, because I checked them about an hour and a half ago, and they didn't seem to need any moisture, but they were cooking through. They were getting plumper and plumper with all that flavor. So I'm going to turn the share screen off and go back to Zoom. And I'm back. Oh.
That was great.
Amazing. Of course. All right. So now we're going to zoom in on, I'm not going to zoom in, but we are going to take a look at the beans in the oven. Now, it does say to cover your beans, and my bean pot did, because I bought it at a garage sale, did not have a lid. But when I was a kid, my mom's didn't have a lid either. She always covered it with aluminum foil. So I feel like that's my family tradition, So here we go. Let me get that spoon. They are thickening up. They're actually not done. They are very close. I actually cooked them part of the way last night and then the rest of the way this morning. So they were quite chilled when I put them in the oven. So that's probably why it took a little bit longer, but I want you to see, can you point the camera? I can't lean this over too far.
Oh, I'm looking there.
I know what your finger was in front of me. Okay, no, here. There we go. There's our beans. And you can see they're still a little liquidy, and you're going to want to wait until that is all gone. But this seems to be working really well today. And they're probably just going to need about another hour's worth of cooking. So, and then I would just, I typically just bring them to the event that I'm going to right in the bean pot. So they're ready to go. And bring a nice big spoon so people can take nice big big helpings. It says that it makes 7 cups. I think that's probably more than the recommended 8 servings, but I think that's probably okay. Because like I said, they're pretty popular, and I have gotten raves about them. Don't claim that it's my recipe, but I know how to make them, so it's a lot of fun. So questions about the beans?
Yes, if you don't have a bean pot, but a casserole oven would work best.
I'm sorry, Vanya, you broke up.
Okay. Are you able to get a little bit better, or?
It's really breaking up.
So the question is, if you don't have a bean pot, what other type of casserole or Dutch oven would work best?
Thank you. I meant to mention that because my husband did ask me about that last night. That's a good question. You can use a Dutch oven would be really good. You want something with pretty solid sides. I would use I've got a lot of old Corningware, and in fact, some of mine are the 1.5 quart that are about this big, and they have lids. And if you made a smaller amount, that would be perfect. What you want to do is you're cooking it at 325, and that's the ideal temperature for Corningware. So if you've got your old Corningware like I do, it would be absolutely perfect. So yeah, a Dutch oven, if you have a smallish one. I have a Dutch oven, but it's really big. So Le Creuset pan, metal would be fine too. Just keep an eye on the liquid and make sure that if it starts to look dry, that you just top it off with a little bit of water. More questions?
Just a lot of comments in the chat. I hope you can hear me a little bit better now.
Yes, perfect.
Great. Yeah. So Anne says that they look marvelous. You should make them for our picnic. And then John Palmer and Brenda Wong, thank you so much for the delicious looking dishes. I agree.
I can't wait till we are doing this in person again. It's just so much more fun to be able to taste everything that people make. So I am really looking forward to the in-person ones again.
Thank you, Donna. I can't wait to try your recipes.
Excellent. Thanks, Shirley. Hi, puppy. Shirley's got her puppy.
Oh no, this is a kitty.
Oh, it's Kitty. Oh, from the way it was looking, it looked like yeah. So
No,
you warmed
thank you
me
so
up
much,
when you-
Donna, for this food demo. I think it was fantastic.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
It
Great.
was. Thank you.
Well, everyone enjoy. Do try it. As you can see, it's very few ingredients. It's real easy, and I hope you try it, and I hope you're popular at the next picnic or potluck that you go to.
Great, thank you, Donna. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.